So Tiffany, in the world that we live in, I think especially in the banking community, there's a tremendous amount of change with
Hmm.
technology and relationships. You know, over the last 5 to 10, even 20 years, I think we've seen banking, at least in some contexts, go from a super high touch industry to
Hmm.
something where, you know, at least in the retail space, a lot of folks will have zero personal relationship with a banker whatsoever, and they're doing sort of
Yeah,
everything electronically through some sort of web interface. So I'm
right.
curious, how much of that has hit commercial banking, and what do
Hmm.
you see in the future of your field with respect to technology and
Sure.
personal relationships?
Well, I'll take it from two different. I will speak a little bit to the retail side because what we've seen in the studies have shown where, you still may not, you know, you may never step foot in a financial center until there's a problem. And what we're seeing is that, when you get that violation of somebody, you look and you're like, wait a minute, where did this money come out of my account? Who did this happen to? Fraud happens all the time. That's a very personal, relational. And I know one of the groups of students that I talked to maybe a year or two ago, when I said, how many of you have had fraud or had some money come out? And they were like, yeah. And I said, and how frustrating was it if you were having to call a 1-800 number or whatever? And they said, oh my gosh, it was awful. So I use that I think, yes, we will continue to have less and less of this daily personal action. But when it's your money and it's very personal, it becomes very emotional. And so I do think at some point, I don't completely at this point, I could be totally off base, see it going totally away where there's not some relationship. But having said that, do I see it less and less? Absolutely. If you think back to how often, we're on the phone or we're having to do things and we do email, and now emails got out of hand, we're finding that our clients maybe they won't call us if they have a problem. They want to do a chat. So I do see that. However, what I do see is when it is a bigger decision and somebody's going to borrow, they're going to make an acquisition and they're going to need to borrow $50 million, there's still a lot of discussion that goes into, you just lose something. We're working with a client right now that's making an acquisition. We're recapitalizing and it's a $50 million credit. And I mean, we've had multiple conversations with them. I mean, yes, they've sent us a lot of information. We can look at those numbers, but there's still something to be said about the conversation and the things that you pick up on and the subtleties that you see. So while it will probably become fewer and fewer of those human interactions, I don't foresee it going away completely because I just think it's too much of an emotional sense. And again, I could be wrong, because look at what's happened just in the last year. How many of us thought you would see your banker, working from their home office and doing video conferencing, right? I mean, a lot of us thought we'd like that, but you would have never, because you just think about the privacy laws that banks are under and all the information and, bankers, we love paper. Well, guess what? Privacy laws with my computer here, I don't print at home. I can't. Like the bank has it locked down because they can't ensure that somebody's personal information might get out, right? So we've adapted a lot in the last year. And so I do think you've seen that change. And to your original question, yeah, are you seeing less? Yes, I would tell you over the last 18 months or year, whatever it's been since we started this pandemic, I have not seen as many folks, but I've done a lot more video conferencing and you still go to lunches. I mean, there's still a certain amount of getting together that occurs. And like I said, on this transaction, we've had a couple of video conferencing calls to talk through that. So that's just my opinion. I think it will change. Again, I think some of the smaller businesses, yeah, maybe it won't be an issue. They're just going to borrow money as a transaction. But when you run into a problem, and look, businesses go through life cycles, right? You know that you teach about it, we see it. When your business is having a little bit of an issue, like what's happened with the pandemic, if you have a relationship with somebody at the bank, then there's somebody who knows you, who understands you, and who says, okay, there's a story here and we need to continue working with them versus, oh, it's just a number and they're not going to be able to pay us and we don't know anything about them. So let's throw them into this default situation and start foreclosing, right? I mean, those are the extremes. And so I do think that there is still an element. And I go back to, there's the 4 C's of lending, and the first one is character. And how do you determine somebody's character if you've not at least had some amount of interaction with them?
Yeah. Well, I think it's there's a unique challenge here too, because you talk about how some folks, both personally and business wise, can kind of survive in the normal day to day. But then once they need something or there's a problem, then hey, we need a relationship. But I think that one of the challenges going forward for the industry is going to be developing those relationships on the front end, because the relationships that sort of are lasting in the crisis or the problem situation are actually built in the normal day-to-day times. But that's when people kind of default into not wanting the relationship. And so so that I think is probably going to be a bit of a challenge to navigate.
And it's a huge challenge. Oh, it's a huge challenge, right? I mean, our CEO talks about, we want to be, the Chick-fil-A or the Starbucks, because think about it. How many banks do people drive by? And this is from the retail side, but how many banks do people drive by till they get to First Horizon? Why are they coming to us? How many places do you drive past getting coffee because you want the Starbucks, right? It's that same type of, there's a reason, there's a relationship, there's an emotional attachment to Starbucks. Now, I don't drink coffee, but this is an example he uses, and I think it's a very appropriate one. Yeah. It is still about connection and building those relationships. And that's where banks have to do a better job, right? I mean, we are investing a lot in technology as a whole industry. You think about Venmo, the banks got together, we do Zelle. People love Venmo. Well, Zelle's actually a little bit better. You can send the money immediately and you don't have to wait. You don't have to pay this huge fee. There's some things. So banks, we may be a little slow, right? At times at adopting, but yeah. I think we're getting better.
Yeah. So we're about out of time today, sure. But I want to just close with a couple of quick questions on just kind of the way you interact with your work. So what energizes you about your job? What do you get really excited about?
Oh, for me? Yeah. So here's a couple of things, and this is why I love what I do. And look, I tell people, if you love what you do, you'll make plenty of money, because now there are days it's work, don't get me wrong. But the reason what energizes me is I love hearing the story, right? I'm a banker by nature, which means I probably don't want to take a lot of risk, right? So I don't have that entrepreneurial spirit. So I tend to live vicariously through my clients. So I love to hear the story about why, how did they decide to start this business, or how did they get into this business, or why are they thinking about that? So I think just the inquisitiveness of seeing and how people create something is just phenomenal to me in making the whole world work, right? The other thing, and there was a quote, and I have searched, I can't find it, but it was a quote that NCMB had on a wall when I first started at Nations Bank, that was, we're the bank that lent the money to the business that employed the people, who then spent money, who then paid taxes, who then created the schools and the roads and all. And so, there's a lot of self-satisfaction. So I'm helping that business continue to thrive. They're employing people that is then helping drive just the day-to-day economy. And two, banks sometimes get a bad rap. I think we actually came up in the world through this whole PPP, SBA lending that's gone on helping the small businesses. And I think people really saw, and we got a lot of satisfaction. I mean, granted, it was an SBA product, in 5 weeks, the bank put this together, you started lending money, but as I told my kids who were here, I said, look, the reason I am working, I mean, there was one day I worked 24 hours straight because we knew that we were making a difference, because this was the difference between a business keeping some people employed, right? And then those people having money to be able to live. And, there's a lot, that's partly why I enjoy it. That's a basic human piece of it, but I really do. I'm just fascinated by learning about all the businesses. And I mean, I'm like, I really wish I had some of that. I'm like, wow, how did they figure out that somebody needed this and they could make money at it, right? It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear. We talk a lot with our students about the importance of fit and finding a fit in a career and in an organization where you can really thrive. And it sounds to me like you're living in the middle of that, and you're a fit. It's what you do is a fit. So
I'm very fortunate. I try to encourage people to really make sure they find the fit, because it makes all the difference in the world. And I'm very fortunate. I get up and I love what I do.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Tiffany, thanks so much for your time today. Love to talk to you again
sometime. Thank you.
So take care.